Welcome to Lessons and Stories. This is the channel where every story carries a lesson. Today we're heading to Moscow, Russia, the largest city in Europe, a place where the winters are so severe they once helped defeat an emperor, and where people have a saying that roughly translates to, "The quieter you are, the further you go." We're going to follow Yana Merkuryeva, 32 years old, an accountant with a mind sharper than most people's entire legal team. What her husband Victor didn't know is that the very silence he mistook for surrender was, in fact, the quietest kind of preparation. Stick around until the end, because this story is packed with lessons. But before we start, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel, and drop a comment telling us what city or state you're watching from. It means everything to us knowing where you all are watching from. All right, let's get into the story. Yana Merkuryeva had never raised her voice once in her 32 years of life. Not once. Not at a cashier who shortchanged her. Not at a neighbor whose music thumped through the wall at midnight. Not even at Victor, her husband of 9 years, when the excuses started coming in shorter and the explanations started arriving less frequently, like a newsletter you never signed up for that just stopped showing up one day. This was not weakness. Pay attention to that, because the story depends on it. This was a choice, a deliberate, ironclad, deeply personal choice. Yana had understood something early in life that most people only learn after a great deal of embarrassment. The person who raises their voice in an argument has already lost it. They've traded their argument for their emotion, and emotions don't hold up in a court of law, or in any other room that matters, for that matter. She was an accountant by profession, and here's something most people in the States wouldn't think twice about. But in Russia, a bookkeeper or an accountant, what they call a buchhalter, isn't just someone who runs numbers for a company. A buchhalter in Russia is essentially the financial conscience of an entire organization. Russian tax law is famously intricate, famously demanding, and famously unforgiving. The accountant doesn't just track money. She is personally liable legally, financially, if something goes wrong with the books. You don't get to say, "I didn't know," you knew, or you were supposed to. This means Russian accountants are trained from day one to read everything twice, trust nothing at face value, and always, always follow the paper trail, which, as it turns out, is exactly the set of skills Yana was going to need. Viktor Merkuryev was 45 years old, an entrepreneur with 3 company branches, separate offices around the city, and one telephone that never not once stayed on the shared charger in the living room. He was the kind of man who walked into a room like he'd already decided the outcome of whatever was about to happen there. He had money. He had presence. And once, a very long time ago, he had a way of looking at Yana like she was the only person in the room. That was what had made her fall for him. Not the money, not the status. On their third date, he had told her, "You think like a chief financial officer." She'd laughed, because she was just a bookkeeper at a small company and definitely was not a chief financial officer. But she hadn't minded the flattery one bit. What she'd noticed, more than the compliment, was the way he said it like he was stating a fact he'd observed carefully and was now reporting back to her. There was a precision to him that she found beautiful. She married that precision. She built a life inside it. 9 years of marriage. A son named Platon, 7 years old, with his father's jaw and his mother's habit of going completely silent when he was thinking hard about something. A 2-story house in the suburbs of Moscow, with a large garden they had planted together in their first year of marriage, when Victor had fumbled with a shovel and laughed at himself, which was something he was still able to do back then. Things had changed slowly. The way light changes in a room when clouds move in, you don't notice it happening. You just notice, eventually, that it's dark. The work trips had gotten longer. The explanations had gotten shorter. That particular way he used to look at her, like she was the only person in the room, had been carefully folded up and put away somewhere she couldn't reach. Yana noticed all of it. She noticed, and she stayed quiet, because she understood something that a lot of people don't. There are questions you don't ask until you're ready to hear the answer, and for a long time, she simply was not ready. The housekeeper's name was Lydia Savina, 60 years old, small, precise, neat, The kind of woman whose face rested in a permanent expression that looked like disapproval but wasn't. That was simply her face. She had worked in their home for 3 years, cleaning every room without being asked twice, never touching papers that weren't hers, never asking questions that weren't necessary. Yana respected her deeply for that. The ability to be present in a space without making yourself a nuisance in it is a rarer quality than most people realize. On a Saturday morning, Victor came downstairs to breakfast without looking up from his phone and announced, in the same tone he would use to discuss switching suppliers, "Lydia won't be coming anymore. I let her go." He said it like she was a subscription service he'd decided to cancel. Yana set her cup down on the table slowly, carefully, so it made no sound. "When?" "Yesterday. Optimization. No point paying for what we can manage without." Look at that. 3 years. The woman had spent 3 years in their home, knew every corner of it, had never once overstepped, and he dismissed her between bites of breakfast like a line item on a budget. No warning, no notice. "You could have told me first," Yana said. "Out of basic courtesy. She worked here for 3 years. "My decision," said Victor, and swiped to the next page on his phone. The conversation was over. That was how all their conversations ended now, not with a fight, not with a slammed door, but with that particular silence Victor retreated into like it was a suit of armor he'd had custom made. The following Sunday, Yana cleaned the house herself. Clayton had gone to her mother's for the weekend. Victor had left in the morning on business, no specification of what kind, and the house was hers, and the silence was hers too. She started in the kitchen, moved through the living room, dusted shelves, rearranged a vase, then climbed the stairs. Victor's study was closed, but not locked. She opened the door. The room smelled like him, a very specific combination of expensive cologne, tobacco from the occasional cigar he allowed himself in here by the open window, and old paper. She moved methodically. The windowsill, the bookshelves, lined with business books and volumes of Soviet-era literature he kept for appearance and never opened. She crouched to reach the bottom shelf, and in the corner of her eye she caught something white beneath the small side table near the wall. A folded piece of paper, tucked under the leg of the table like someone had shoved it there quickly, in a hurry. She picked it up with 2 fingers and unfolded it. The handwriting was unfamiliar, large, uneven, the letters pressing hard into the paper, like whoever wrote it was pushing through something inside themselves to get the words out. "Your husband is a monster. Look under the rug. You need to know the truth." Yana read it twice, then a third time, slowly, the way you read a document that is going to have consequences. The only person who had regular access to this study weekly, without exception, was Lydia. This was Lydia's room to clean. Lydia, who had been fired without warning. Lydia, who had not gone quietly, but had left this behind instead, folded small, pushed under a table, waiting for the right person to find it. Lydia was not fired because of optimization. Yana folded the note, put it in her pocket, and walked to the center of the room, where a large, dark rug covered most of the floor. She knelt down and folded back one corner, then another, then the third, then the fourth. Nothing. Just parquet, the seam of dust at the edges, one paperclip that had gotten lost at some point in its small paperclip life. She was about to stand when she noticed a section of the rug's backing that didn't lay flat the way the rest of it did. A small stiffness in one spot, like something was beneath it. She ran her finger along the edge and felt it immediately. Something hard, taped flat to the underside of the rug. Small, flat, metal, a key. Yana stood with the key on her open palm and looked at it for several seconds. She knew, with the precise calm that was her entire personality, that what came next would change things. She also knew she was going to open whatever this unlocked. That was never a question. She remembered, 1 year ago, April, she had spent a week at her mother's home across the city. Her mother had been ill, the doctor had ordered bed rest, and Yana had gone to help. 7 days. She'd come home briefly twice to collect things, but she had not been in this room. When she returned for good, Victor had met her at the door with a smile which in itself should have been a note, and told her he'd done a little renovation in his study. Repainted the walls, hung a new painting. She had looked in, nodded, said nice, and moved on with her life. The painting was large, in a heavy, dark wooden frame. A river, a field, a horizon. She had never looked at it closely. There was never any reason to. She walked to the wall now. She took hold of the frame with both hands. It was heavier than it looked. Much heavier. She lifted it off its hook and leaned it against the wall and turned back to look at what was behind it. A rectangular outline in the wall, barely visible against the light gray paint, but it was there, clean and deliberate. A built-in metal compartment with a small lock at its center. Professional work, not something done in an afternoon. This was planned. She inserted the key, turned it. The lock opened with a click so clean and quiet it almost felt like a courtesy. Inside the compartment were 5 items. Yana removed them one by one and laid them across Victor's desk in a row, left to right, the way she arranged financial documents before an audit. The first was a notarized power of attorney. She read the first line and felt something cold move through her spine, not fear. Exactly. Something more precise than fear. The document was issued in her name, granting Viktor Alexandrovich Merkuriev full authority to manage and transfer their shared real estate property, their house. It was signed, stamped, notarized. The date at the top was in April of the previous year, the specific week she had been staying at her mother's. Here's something most people in the States wouldn't know about how real estate and marriage work in Russia. Under Russian family law, property acquired during marriage is considered jointly owned by both spouses, which sounds protective, and it is, in theory. But it also means that to transfer or sell that property, you technically need consent from both. The way around that, if someone is determined to get around it, is a power of attorney, a document where one spouse authorizes the other to act on their behalf. In the United States, a power of attorney is treated seriously, but in Russia, a notarized power of attorney carries enormous legal weight and can be used to move assets with very little friction, provided the paperwork looks right. This paperwork looked right, but Yana had not signed it. She had not been in the city when it was signed. The second document was a loan agreement in Yana's name, 2,400,000 rubles. To put that in terms an American audience can feel, that is roughly the cost of a solid used car, or a year of private school tuition, or 6 months of mortgage payments on a decent home. Not a fortune, but not nothing either. Enough debt to damage a credit record. Enough interest accumulating monthly to create real financial pressure. Enough to make a woman who doesn't know about it look, on paper, like she is quietly drowning. A bank she had never heard of, with a generic name that told her nothing. The date was May of the previous year. She had never applied for this loan. She had never received this money. She had never made a single payment on it. But the debt sat on her name like a coat someone else had put on her while she was sleeping. The third was a life insurance policy. Yana Alexandrovna Merkurieva insured. Coverage amount, 5 million rubles. In American terms, roughly $55,000, enough to buy a small apartment outright in many Russian cities. Enough to start an entirely new life somewhere else. Enough to make a person's death not just a tragedy, but a transaction. Insured event. Death of the policyholder. Beneficiary, Viktor Alexandrovich Merkuriev. She set that one down very slowly, very carefully. The way you set down something you don't want to hold, but cannot afford to drop. The fourth was a property purchase agreement for an apartment, a real address in Moscow, registered in Victor's name only. And the fifth was a photograph, printed on a regular office printer, color, slightly grainy. Victor standing at the entrance to a building. Beside him, a woman, maybe 30 years old, blonde, a light dress. On her hip, a small child 3 years old, roughly. Victor was not looking at the camera. He was looking at the woman. And in that look, in the angle of his head, in the slight relaxation of his shoulders, in the barely there smile, Yana recognized something she hadn't seen directed at herself in a very long time. She sat at her husband's desk and looked at the 5 items arranged in front of her. She was an accountant. She knew how to read a scheme. Behind every set of numbers there is a person making decisions, and behind every document there is an intention. The intention here was not difficult to decode. The house was being transferred through a forged power of attorney. The loan put her in debt without her knowledge. The insurance policy made her death profitable. The apartment was already purchased for another family, and the housekeeper who had seen something she wasn't supposed to see had been removed before she could say anything. Almost. She hadn't quite been removed in time. Yana stood up, walked out of the study, went downstairs to the kitchen. She stood for a moment, looking out at the garden at the apple tree she and Victor had planted together in the first year of their marriage. The one he'd cursed at all afternoon because the branches wouldn't cooperate. He'd laughed about it eventually. She'd laughed too. That apple tree was tall now, full canopy. It did not know that anything was wrong. She picked up her phone and searched. Notary Pavel Sumarokov, Moscow. That was the name on the power of attorney. She found his office in 3 minutes. She noted the address and the phone number in her phone. Then she went back upstairs, photographed every document individually close, sharp, every stamp and signature and date legible, returned everything to the compartment, locked it, hung the painting back on the wall, put the key back where she'd found it. When Victor came home that evening and said, "How was your day?" Yana said, "Fine," and served dinner and watched him eat and check his phone and not once look at her. 9 years, she had thought that distance was just exhaustion. Now she understood it was calculated. You cannot look warmly at someone you are systematically dismantling. It requires a particular kind of wall. He had built his wall carefully. What he had not done was check whether she was building one too. Monday morning, Yana called her supervisor. Now, Russians have a word for a very specific life stage предпенсионный возраст, the pre-retirement zone. That particular stretch of professional life when a person is still technically employed but has spiritually already moved to a country house. That was Gennady Fomik. 2 years from his pension, small cactus on his desk. No one had ever seen him water it. He had perfected, over 30 years in Russian accounting, the art of approving requests before the person making them had finished the sentence. If he had known that the 2 days he was about to approve were the opening move in one of the more remarkable fraud cases Moscow would see that year, he would have approved them just as fast. Gennady Fomich had not survived 30 years in that profession by asking questions that were not his to ask. She had not taken personal leave in a year and a half. He said, "Of course, Yana Alexandrovna," and the call ended before she had time to thank him. She was deeply grateful for that. Victor left for the office at 5 minutes past 9. She watched from the bedroom window as he got into his black Mercedes bought 2 years ago, which he was very proud of. Because according to Victor, a man's car should reflect his standing, and the automatic gates closed behind him. Silence. She called the notary office. A young woman answered, efficient and professionally pleasant. Yana explained that she needed to verify a document that had apparently been notarized in their office, a document issued in her name that she had not, in fact, signed. The secretary put her on hold for exactly 2 seconds. "Can you come in today?" "The notary sees clients from 11. "I'll be there at 11, Yana said. She arrived at 10:50. The office was on the 2nd floor of an older building in a business district, high ceilings, leather chairs in the reception area, an aquarium with fish that moved so slowly they seemed to be consulting on something. Everything about the space radiated the particular seriousness of a place where people sign documents that will outlast the relationships that produce them. Pavel Sumarokov was exactly what his name and profession suggested. Around 60, solidly built, with a carefully groomed look and the expression of a man who had spent 30 years seeing what greed does to families and had stopped being surprised by it somewhere around year 10. He spoke slowly and weighed each word individually before releasing it. He was, in other words, a man who understood that words in his line of work have consequences. Now, for anyone who doesn't know back home in the States, a notary public is basically the person at the bank who stamps your document and charges you $8. You can find one at the UPS store. You can find one at the public library. It's a pretty limited job, and that's fine, because the stakes are usually pretty limited too. In Russia, a notary is a completely different animal. A Russian notary is a licensed officer of the state. They handle real estate transfers, inheritance, major contracts, powers of attorney. When a Russian notary puts that stamp on a document, it carries legal weight that can physically move property from one person's name to another's. Which is exactly why forging one is not a white-collar slap on the wrist. You're not just faking a signature. You are corrupting a state official's seal. That's a serious crime, and Pavel Sumarokov, sitting across from Yana right now, knew it. Yana laid the photograph of the power of attorney on his desk. She told him, calmly, that this document bore her name, her signature, and his stamp, and that she had not been in his office on the date in question. That she had, in fact, been in another city entirely. Sumarokov put on his glasses. He examined the printout with the unhurried thoroughness of a man who reads the fine print on everything, always. He turned to his computer. He checked the registry. He compared the numbers. Then he removed his glasses and folded his hands on the desk in the way of someone who is about to say something they wish they didn't have to. "The document is registered," he said. He paused. "However, I am not in a position to share the details of how it was processed without an official request. If you believe this document was executed without your presence or under irregular circumstances, that constitutes grounds for a formal complaint. At that point, we are legally obligated to produce the full documentation of the transaction." "One question," Yana said. Her voice was level. "On the date listed on this document, I was in another city. I have the receipts, the phone records, the timestamps. If someone came to your office that day, claiming to be me without actually being me, is that technically possible?" Sumarokov looked at her for a long moment over the top of his glasses. "Theoretically, no. A notary is required to verify the identity of the signatory in person at the moment of signing. However, if someone presented a convincing set of identification documents and was physically similar enough to the person named on those documents," he did not finish the sentence. "The sentence did not need finishing. I recommend you consult an attorney immediately," he said. "Thank you," said Yana. "You will be receiving an official request shortly." She stood, tucked the printout into her bag, and walked out. From the notary's office, she went directly to the bank. The small, forgettable institution listed on the loan agreement. A branch office on the ground floor of a shopping center, the kind of bank that doesn't advertise much, doesn't ask many questions, and makes its business on the kinds of clients who value speed and discretion over reputation. A few teller windows, a short line of 3 people. Yana stood in line and waited. When her turn came, she set her identification documents and the photo of the loan agreement on the counter, and told the teller a young woman named Alina, whose badge was the only formal thing about her expression, that she had discovered the bad existence of a credit account in her name that she had not opened, for a loan she had not applied for and had never received. Alina looked at her screen. Then she looked at Yana. Then she looked at her screen again, as if hoping the numbers might rearrange themselves into something less problematic between glances. They did not. She excused herself and came back with a manager, a man of about 40 in a tie, who arrived with the bearing of someone informed of a small fire during what was supposed to be a completely uneventful Tuesday. He had the look of a person whose morning had been fine until approximately 3 minutes ago. He brought Yana into a private office. He reviewed the account. Then he explained. The loan had been executed remotely, through an online account opened in her name. Verification had been done through a phone number linked to the account at the time of opening. "What number?" Yana asked. He read it to her. She wrote it in her notebook, though she already knew what it was going to be. She had known since the night before, when she'd first seen that number on the document in the hidden compartment. 18 months ago, Victor had upgraded his phone. He'd given Yana his old phone card, his old number, telling her she should re-register it in her name for household use. She had kept meaning to do it. The card sat in the drawer of her nightstand. It had been sitting there for a year and a half. Victor knew exactly where it was. He knew exactly what was in every drawer of her nightstand. "What information would I need in order to challenge this loan and freeze interest accumulation during the dispute?" she asked. "You'd need to submit a formal complaint. I can provide the form." He provided the form. She filled it out cleanly, without a single correction, in her accountant's careful handwriting. The manager watched her do it with the expression of a man who had expected tears and gotten something he didn't quite have a category for. She left the bank at 1:30 in the afternoon, stood on the sidewalk, and searched her phone for a law firm she had noticed the previous evening while organizing her research. They had handled several high-profile cases involving asset fraud and disputed property. She scrolled through their listed attorneys. Mark Kedroff, 41 years old, specialization, family law, property disputes, civil case representation, 12 years in practice. His photograph showed a lean man with dark hair, going slightly silver at the temples, and the look of someone whose job is to listen more than he talks. She called. She booked an appointment for the following morning at 10 o'clock. Then she got back in her car. She had one more stop before picking up Clayton the address from the property agreement. Mira Street, Building 14. She wasn't going in. She just needed to see that it existed outside of a document. The building was beige, 9 floors, entirely ordinary, one of 10,000 like it in Moscow. She sat parked across from it for 5 minutes, looked at the windows, and drove away. Some things you need to see with your own eyes before they become real enough to act on. That was real enough. The boy came through the school doors with his backpack slightly crooked, the way it always was, and a crumpled drawing in his hand that he'd made in art class. He held it out to her without saying anything, the way children offer things they're not sure about. "That's you," he said. "I drew you." She looked at the drawing. A figure with dark hair and wide-open arms, the arms spreading outward like branches. Next to the figure, a smaller shape with a backpack. "It's beautiful," she said. She put it in her bag, next to the photographs of the documents, next to the complaint form from the bank, next to the notary's address she had saved in her phone. Clayton took her hand and they walked to the car. He talked about something from school. She listened to every word. That evening, Victor came home in a good mood. This was rare. He ruffled Clayton's hair, asked about school, sat on the sofa while the boy showed him something on a tablet. Yana watched from the kitchen doorway and thought, a good mood, for Victor, always had a specific cause. He did not smile without a reason. Something in his scheme had moved in the direction he wanted, which meant she had less time than she'd estimated. When Clayton was asleep, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and opened a new document. She titled it with one word, facts, and she began to type, dry, precise, without emotion or commentary, the way you write an inventory report. The power of attorney, the date, the notary's confirmation that it existed, the evidence that she was elsewhere, the loan, the phone number, the formal complaint filed, the insurance policy, the beneficiary, the question of how her signature had been obtained, the apartment, the address, the other family, the photograph. She saved the document. She put the laptop on the top shelf of the linen closet behind a stack of folded towels, in a spot Victor had never once reached for in 9 years of marriage. Then she went upstairs. Victor was already asleep. She lay down beside him and looked at the ceiling. Outside, a cricket in the garden was counting time steady, methodical, without pause. In the room down the hall, Clayton was breathing evenly. She thought about something very simple. A person who builds a trap always has one blind spot. They are convinced the other person sees nothing, that she will stay exactly where they put her, that the silence means she isn't moving. Victor had spent years watching Yana stay quiet. He had confused her silence with stillness. Tomorrow, at 10 in the morning, attorney Mark Kedroff would begin to learn the difference. Tuesday morning, Yana put on a gray blazer, the one she wore to serious professional meetings not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because that particular blazer made her stand up straighter. And standing straight made her feel like herself. She had learned a long time ago not to underestimate what you wear into a difficult room. Mark Kedrov received her exactly at 10 o'clock. His office was in Zamoskvorekie, which is one of those Moscow neighborhoods that has been around long enough that the buildings remember things. Old merchant district, south of the river, the kind of place where the streets curve in ways that were never planned by anyone. You go there to find the kind of attorney who has seen enough of human nature to be useful, not the kind who has a reception desk with an orchid on it and a view of the city skyline. The useful kind. The office itself had high windows, bookshelves along every wall, and a large desk made of light-colored wood on which there was not a single unnecessary object. Kedrov stood when she entered, shook her hand firmly and without ceremony and said, "Tell me what happened." She spoke for 20 minutes. No emotion, no detours, only facts, in chronological order, with the logical connection between each event made explicit. The hidden compartment, the power of attorney, the loan, the insurance policy, the apartment, the photograph, the notary, the bank. Kedrov listened without interrupting. He took notes in a shorthand she made no attempt to read. When she finished, he looked at his notes for a moment. Then he looked up. "You have an analytical mind," he said, "not as a compliment, as an observation. You've laid this out more clearly than most attorneys present a case file." "I'm an accountant," she said. "I work with documents." "That's going to help us considerably." He closed his notepad. "Let me be direct. On the power of attorney, we need a handwriting analysis on the signature. That is the first and most critical piece. If the analysis confirms the signature is not yours, the document is legally void, and every transaction conducted under its authority collapses with it. On the loan, you've already submitted the dispute complaint that was the right move. The next step is a criminal complaint to the police. Fraud. The Internet Protocol address used to open the online account will be obtained through the investigation. On the insurance policy, we need to determine how your signature appeared on that contract, which agent, which process, under what circumstances. On the house, he paused briefly. The very first thing I do today is file a prohibition on any registration actions on that property. While this dispute is active, that house does not move. Not one transaction. How quickly can that prohibition be in place? By the end of today. And the criminal complaint? Right now. Together. I'll accompany you. They spent nearly 2 hours at the police station. Kedrov moved through it the way people move through a system they know well, precisely, calmly, with the right words in the right order. Here's something worth knowing about filing a criminal complaint in Russia. The process involves a specific form, a duty officer, a registration stamp, a case number, and at least one person in the building who is handling approximately 40 other things simultaneously and would very much like you to know that. The duty investigator was a young man whose desk had the organized chaos of someone fighting a war on 17 fronts at once. He listened, he wrote, he stamped, he promised to pass the case forward. He had the determined look of a person who went into law enforcement because he believed in justice and had since learned that justice and paperwork were essentially the same thing. At the exit, Kedrov said quietly, "A detective named Kulagin will contact you within a couple of days. He handles cases like this. He's good." Yana noted the name. Back at Kedrov's office, before she left, he asked her to write out 2 full paragraphs in her natural handwriting, a standard text, nothing specific, just enough for a graphologist to work with. She wrote without asking why. He photographed the pages and told her he would dispatch the handwriting analysis request that evening. She nodded and picked up her bag. They came out onto the street into a cold, bright afternoon. Kedrov looked at her and said, "The apartment on Mira Street. Have you found out who lives there?" "I drove past. I didn't go in." "Go in," he said, carefully. "That woman is most likely also a victim of this scheme. She just doesn't know it yet. If she'll talk to you, her testimony will carry significant weight. Go to her as one human being to another. No accusations. No anger." "I understand," Yana said. They said goodbye at the curb. She watched his silver Audi pull away. Then she called her mother and asked if she could take Playton for the night. Her mother, as always, asked one question with her tone, and then asked no questions at all out loud. "I'll pick him up," she said. Yana drove to Mira Street. She parked across from the building, the same beige 9 floors she had seen from the car the day before, which had looked ordinary then and looked ordinary now, which was exactly the point. She sat in the car for 20 minutes looking at the entrance. Then she got out, walked to the intercom panel of the second entrance, and pressed the button for apartment 37. A long pause. Then a woman's voice, slightly guarded. "Who is it?" "My name is Yana Merkuryeva. I'm here on a personal matter. It's important. Please open the door. I won't take much of your time." Another pause. Then the lock buzzed open. The woman who opened the door to apartment 37 was younger than she'd looked in the photograph. 29 years old. Blonde. The face of a young mother who doesn't sleep quite enough, but is holding everything together through sheer determination. There was no child in her arms. A cartoon was playing quietly from the other room. "Are you here for me?" she said. "My name is Yana Merkuryeva," Yana said. "I am the wife of Viktor Merkuryev." The woman, Vera Ryabtseva, stood completely still for several seconds. Then, slowly, she stepped back from the door and opened it wider. "Come in." The apartment was a two-bedroom, furnished simply and with care. New furniture, clean floors, children's toys arranged near the sofa in a way that suggested someone tidied them regularly. The kitchen smelled like fresh coffee. It was the home of a woman who was making a real effort with what she had, and doing it well. They sat at the kitchen table across from each other. Yana placed her phone on the table with the marriage certificate on screen. "Victor and I have been married for 9 years," she said. "Our son Platon is 7. Vera looked at the certificate, her lips pressed together slightly. "He told me you were his ex-wife," she said, very quietly. "That you'd been divorced for years. That the house was being transferred to him as part of the settlement. That it was almost finalized. That soon." She stopped. "That soon what?" Yana asked. Vera raised her eyes. In them was not anger. It was the very specific bewilderment of someone who has just felt the floor tilt beneath their feet and hasn't yet registered that they're falling. That soon everything would be official. That the property question was nearly resolved. That she, his ex-wife, wasn't contesting anything. "I am contesting," Yana said. "It's my house. I live in it. We are not divorced. He is my husband." A long silence. From the other room, children's cartoon music, the aggressively cheerful kind, all xylophone and sound effects played on without a care in the world. Someone in that cartoon was having an excellent time. The contrast with the two women sitting across from each other at that kitchen table was, to put it mildly, considerable. "How old is your child?" Yana asked. 3. Vera's voice had gone small. "His name is Artyom." Yana nodded. She looked at this woman and saw exactly what was on the other side of Victor's scheme. A 29-year-old who had been handed a beautiful story about a successful, available man with his life in order and his past neatly resolved. She had believed it because it was presented to her with the same precise, calibrated confidence that Victor brought to every room he walked into. She had built her life around it. She had had a child with him. She was not the villain. She was the other victim. And I want you to hold on to that, because it matters for how the rest of this plays out. "I didn't come here to argue," Yana said. "I came because you need to know what's actually happening, and because I need your help." She laid it out, the power of attorney, the loan, the insurance policy, her death as the profitable outcome. Vera listened without moving. Now pay attention to Vera here. She didn't get up and leave. She didn't get defensive. She didn't start making calls. She just sat there and listened to the full shape of the thing. That takes something. Most people, when the ground falls out from under them, start grabbing for the nearest solid surface. Vera just sat with it, steady. Then Yana said, "There's a criminal case opening. A detective will want to speak with you. Your messages with Victor, the ones where he talked about the house being resolved, about starting fresh, those messages document intent. They are evidence. Are you willing to give a statement?" Vera was quiet for a moment. Then, from the other room came a small voice calling for Mama. She stood, went in, came back a minute later. Her face, when she returned, had changed. Something had settled in it. A decision. "Yes," she said. "I'm willing. I didn't know he was married. You have to believe me." "I believe you," Yana said. She left Vera with Kedrov's card before she walked out. She asked her not to contact Victor or tell him about this visit. Vera nodded with the look of someone who was still processing everything but was no longer on his side. In the car, Yana sat motionless for a moment. Then she texted Kedrov. "Meeting happened. She's willing to testify. There are messages confirming intent. When can you meet with both of us?" His answer came in 3 minutes. "Tomorrow at 11. Good work." She drove to her mother's to pick up Platon. He was waiting at the gate with his scooter and the entirely satisfied expression of a person who had spent the day exactly as he would have chosen. "We made pies," he reported, getting into the car. "Apple. I rolled the dough myself." "That's impressive," Yana said. She drove home listening to him describe the pies in the detail they apparently deserved. Wednesday morning arrived with a phone call she had not expected. 7 in the morning. If Yana had known, when she poured her coffee that morning, that the most significant phone call of this entire chapter of her life was about to come through on a Wednesday, the one day Clayton categorically refused to enjoy because it contained physical education she might have at least sat down first. She did not sit down. She was standing at the window with her cup when the unknown Moscow number lit up her screen. A male voice answered when she picked up measured, official, the tone of someone accustomed to delivering unpleasant information and doing so without drama. Yana Alexandrovna Merkuryeva. This is a call from the Judicial Department. A petition has been filed against you. An official notification will be sent by post. However, I am calling in advance because the petitioner has requested expedited review. Petitioner, Viktor Alexandrovich Merkuryev. 3 points. First, petition to declare you financially incapacitated and restrict your right to independently manage property. Second, petition to transfer full management of joint assets to the petitioner during the review period. Third, petition to temporarily restrict your parental rights, citing alleged psychological instability. Yana set her coffee cup on the windowsill without making a sound. "Thank you for calling," she said. "I will receive the official notification. Goodbye." She put the phone down. Clayton was at the kitchen table eating oatmeal and reading a book he had propped against his glass. He had heard none of it, or heard and not understood. Either way, he was turning pages, spooning oatmeal mechanically, existing in his 7-year-old world with total calm. She was grateful for him in a way she couldn't have put into words. She texted Kedrov immediately. Victor filed in court. 3 counts: incapacity, property, parental rights. Call when you can. The response came in 2 minutes. "I'm going to the office now. I'll be there by 9. Come before 11. We need to talk before the meeting with Vera." Now, let's just pause on what Victor did here for a moment, because it's worth recognizing for what it is. He found out somehow that Yana had started moving. Maybe the bank flagged something in a shared system. Maybe the notary's office made a call they shouldn't have. Maybe he simply noticed that she had gotten quieter in a different way than her usual quiet. Whatever the signal was, he received it, and his response was not to back down. His response was to attack first, and from 3 directions at once. In the United States, a custody dispute and a competency challenge are 2 entirely separate legal processes that take months to even get scheduled. What Victor did here was the Russian equivalent of filing a preemptive strike, burying her in 3 simultaneous legal fires so she'd be too busy defending herself on all fronts to continue building her case against him. It was calculated. She even said so herself. It was smart. Tactically, it was very smart. What it was not was right. And in the long run, it would prove to be the single decision that handed her the most useful piece of evidence against him. Kedrov was waiting at the office when she arrived at 9:15. He did not start with reassurances. He started with facts, which was exactly what she needed. "This is a classic preemptive strike," he said. "He's trying to occupy the high ground before your defense is complete. If the court grants a temporary restriction on your property rights, he gains freedom to maneuver. If he layers the parental rights challenge on top of that, you're dividing your energy and your resources between protecting your son and attacking his scheme." He paused. He also submitted a psychiatric evaluation, a private clinic. "It claims you exhibit signs of chronic anxiety disorder with elements of paranoid ideation and require specialist supervision." Yana took the copy he slid across the desk and read it from top to bottom. The clinic name was unfamiliar. The doctor's signature was not quite legible by accident or design. The stamp was formally correct. The document looked, on the surface, exactly official enough to be taken seriously by a judge who hadn't seen anything like it before. "He ordered this made," Yana said. "It was not a question." "Almost certainly," Kedrov said. "There are private clinics that will produce documentation like this without any actual examination, for the appropriate fee. It's a separate criminal act, but proving it quickly is difficult. It requires an investigation of the clinic itself, so our counter is simple and airtight." You get an independent psychiatric evaluation today, at a state institution. I've already arranged access. The Serbsky Center takes emergency referrals in active legal disputes. Here's something Americans might find surprising. The Serbsky Center in Moscow is one of the oldest psychiatric institutions in Russia, been operating since the 1800s. In the Soviet era, it became known for something dark: political dissidents being declared mentally ill as a way of silencing them. That history is real, and it is documented. But here's what matters for Yana's story right now. In modern Russian courts, a Serbsky Center evaluation is the gold standard. State institution, full credentials. When a judge sees that report, it carries weight that no document from a small private clinic can touch. Victor had submitted a piece of paper from a clinic nobody had heard of. Yana was about to hand the court the state's own answer. That is not a fair fight, and it was not supposed to be. And on the incapacity claim? She asked. He has no legitimate basis. You're employed. You have no outstanding obligations, and the only debt in your name is already formally disputed. I'll file the objection to the court today. On the property, the prohibition we registered Tuesday means nothing can move regardless. He cannot execute a single transaction on that house legally, not while our flag is on it. The handwriting analysis on the power of attorney? Filed yesterday evening. Samples of your handwriting transmitted to the expert. Results in 3 to 4 days. I'm not. Vera arrived at 11 exactly. She came alone. A neighbor was watching Artyom. She looked pale and a little lost, but she held herself upright. When she saw Yana in the waiting area, she stopped for a moment, then nodded. Yana nodded back. Between them was no warmth, but something steadier, a shared understanding of the situation that made warmth beside the point. In Kedrov's office, they sat side by side on the same side of the table. Vera handed over her phone with the full message thread. Kedrov read in silence, methodical and unhurried, photographing each screen. He stopped on one message and turned the phone to show them both. When everything is resolved, we can start fresh. The house question is being handled. Hold on a little longer. He looked at Vera. When he said the house question is being handled, did he explain what that meant? He said the house was in his name and there were formalities left with his ex-wife, that it was just a matter of paperwork, that once it was done. She paused. He said once it was done we could register officially, get married. Are you prepared to confirm all of that in a formal witness statement with the investigator? Yes, Vera said, clearly, without hesitation. I'm ready. I didn't know he was married. I need that to be on record. Kedrov nodded and closed his notepad. Detective Kulagin will be in touch within days. Do not delete anything from that phone. Make a backup copy on a second device today. Print the most significant messages and keep paper copies as well. After Vera left, Yana stayed for a few minutes. He knows I'm moving, she said. He filed too fast for it to be a coincidence. 2 days after I went to the notary and the bank. Almost certainly, Kedrov agreed. Either the bank system flagged something through a shared channel, or the notary's office made a call they shouldn't have, or most likely he noticed a change in you at home. People who are used to controlling their environment are extremely sensitive to even small shifts. Has your behavior changed? Yana considered it honestly. I've been talking less, but I was never very talkative. For someone who's been monitoring you for years, even a slight change in baseline is a signal. Be prepared, the pressure is going to increase. He may try to speak with you directly, to find out what you know and how far along you are. Don't confirm anything. Don't deny anything. And any significant conversation, record it. In Russia, if you're a participant in the conversation yourself, recording without telling the other person is completely legal. You don't have to disclose the device. You just have to be in the room. Understood, she said. She was almost at the door when she added, I'll buy a recorder on the way. She went to the Serbsky Center in the early afternoon. 2 hours of evaluation, standardized psychological testing, a structured clinical interview, multiple assessment protocols. The doctor, an older woman with a quiet voice and the professional habit of listening to the full answer before formulating the next question, gave nothing away during the examination itself. She simply asked, observed, and noted. The conclusion was issued an hour after the examination ended. Yana read it sitting on a hard plastic chair in a corridor that smelled like institutional cleaning fluid and old paper. No psychiatric disorders identified. Psychologically sound. Emotional state. Within normal reactive range, given active situational stressors. No evidence of paranoid ideation, anxiety disorder, or any other pathological condition. She photographed it and sent it to Kedrov. His reply came immediately. Perfect. His private piece of paper against the state institution's formal finding. The court will see exactly what that private document is. She drove home. Platon was already there. Her mother had brought him back and was in the kitchen, where a pot of soup was on the stove and bread was sliced on the board. Yana walked in and hugged her mother at the stove, face against her shoulder, without saying a word. Her mother put a hand on her back and didn't ask a single question. The ability to be present for someone without demanding anything from the moment is the rarest form of love. Yana had known this about her mother for a long time, and she had never been more grateful for it than in that moment. Victor came home at 7:30. He walked in, took his jacket off, hung it on the hook in the hallway. All his usual movements, perfectly calibrated, nothing out of place. He saw her mother in the kitchen, raised one eyebrow, said nothing, sat down to eat, complimented the soup, asked Platon about school, everything exactly as normal, as if he had not, that same morning, filed a petition to strip his wife of her financial autonomy, her property rights, and her relationship with her own child. Between us, there is a very specific kind of cold that it takes to eat soup enthusiastically, while the person across the table has no idea you just tried to have them declared mentally unfit in a court of law. Most people would at least lose their appetite. Victor asked for seconds. That is not haste. That is not rage. That is the behavior of a man so certain of his control that the cruelty requires no adjustment to his composure. That is the real danger of Viktor Merkuryev. Not the schemes any clever person with bad intentions can build a scheme. The danger was the absolute absence of a flicker. He could sit across from the person he was dismantling, compliment her mother's cooking, and feel nothing that showed on his face. After her mother left and Platon was in bed, Victor came to the kitchen doorway while Yana was washing dishes. He stood there for 3 seconds without speaking. She felt him looking at her back. "They called you today," he said, "from the court." She kept washing. Same steady circular motion, plate after plate. They called. "I want you to understand," he said, in the tone of a man, explaining something straightforward to someone he expects to be slow about it. "This isn't an attack. It's protection for my interests, and for Platon's. You've been unstable lately. You know that yourself. I'm doing this for our son." She set the clean plate in the rack, picked up the next one, did not turn around. "All right, Victor," she said. A pause. He had not expected that. She could feel the pause recalibrating. "Is that all you want to say?" "For now, yes. Watch what happens to his body here, because this is where Viktor Merkuryev meets the one thing his entire scheme was not designed to handle. He had built the power of attorney for a wife who would panic. He had built the loan for a wife who would crumble under debt. He had built the insurance policy for a wife who could be made to disappear. He had not built anything for a wife who would say all right and keep washing the dishes. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His right hand, which had been resting against the doorframe, dropped to his side. He exhaled through his nose, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the very specific, controlled frustration of a man who expected an opening and found a wall. "Fine," he said, and went to his study and closed the door with slightly more force than necessary. Not a slam, but not nothing either. Yana waited until his footsteps were gone. Then she took a small digital recorder from her pocket the size of a large flash drive, bought that afternoon on the way to the Serbsky Center, and pressed stop. The display read 42 seconds. Victor's voice, steady and clear. "This isn't an attack. It's protection for my interests and for Platon's." She connected it to her phone and sent the file to Kedrov with a note. "Tonight at home." He started the conversation himself. Kedrov replied within minutes. "Save the original. This will be useful." She switched the kitchen light off and went upstairs. Outside, the garden was warm and still. An apple tree in full leaf. A cricket marking the seconds steadily from somewhere in the dark. Thursday morning, Detective Grigory Cooligan called at 6:45. His voice was low and unhurried, like a man who had spent 20 years watching what people do to each other for money and had made peace with being unsurprised by any of it. He asked if she could come in at 2 in the afternoon. She said yes. He sent the address a minute later. She used the 4 hours before the meeting productively. She printed every document photograph at high resolution, organized them chronologically in transparent sleeves, the apartment purchase first, then the power of attorney, then the loan, then the insurance policy, because that was the order Victor had built the scheme, and that order told the story better than any summary she could write. New home secured first, then the old home arranged to transfer, then the debt placed on her name, then her death made profitable. She put the Serbsky Center conclusion and the copy of her bank complaint in a separate envelope and set it beside the folder. Cooligan's office was a working room. Small desk, 2 chairs for visitors, a safe against the wall, a whiteboard covered in diagrams and names connected by arrows, the kind of thing that in an American crime drama would have a dramatic red string running through it. Here, it just looked like someone had been doing math. No decorations, no personal items, not even a sad desk plant. A man who spent his days inside other people's worst decisions had apparently decided his room did not need personality on top of it. He took the folder and moved through it with the unhurried thoroughness of a reader who doesn't skim. At the insurance policy, he stopped longest. He read it twice, then set it to the side with a deliberateness that told her something. "Did you organize these by date?" he asked, without looking up. "By construction sequence," she said. "The order he built it in, not the order I found them." He looked up at that. "You're an accountant. Dates are intention," she said. He nodded once, closed the folder. "The handwriting analysis is already running. Your attorney sent samples last evening. Results in 3 to 4 days. On the Internet Protocol address for the loan, we issued the bank a formal request this morning. They must respond within 2 business days. Both of those are the structural pillars. Everything else depends on them. What do you expect to find on the address? If it matches his office network or his home connection, we have direct technical evidence of who opened that account. Computers don't lie. People do." He asked her for documentary proof of her absence from Moscow on the day the power of attorney was signed. She opened her bag and produced an envelope she had prepared the evening before. A pharmacy receipt from the city where her mother lived, time-stamped that day. A printout of her phone call log showing all calls placed and received from that date, with the network's registered cell towers confirming her location throughout. Cooligan opened the envelope, looked inside, and for the first time since she'd walked into his office, one eyebrow moved slightly and briefly upward. "You prepared this yourself?" "Last night," she said. He put the envelope in her folder without another word, and I'll tell you that single raised eyebrow from Grigory Cooligan was probably the highest compliment Yana received throughout this entire ordeal. This was a man who had spent 20 years looking at evidence prepared by attorneys, investigators, forensic accountants. She was a bookkeeper who stayed up late and did it herself in one evening. That eyebrow earned every millimeter it moved. "On the insurance policy," he said, "do you recall signing any documents related to insurance in the past 2 years?" She thought carefully. 2 years ago, we renewed the car insurance. Victor handled all of it. He brought home a stack of forms and told me to sign here and here. I signed without reading them. He said it was standard auto insurance paperwork. Kulagin nodded slowly. "So among those forms there may have been a life insurance contract." He said it not as a question. A person signs a package of documents without examining them individually. Classic methodology. We'll request the full documentation from the insurance company agent records, processing chain, the original signed forms. She drove home that evening thinking about that stack of papers Victor had brought to the kitchen table 2 years ago, his hand placing them in front of her, her hand picking up the pen and moving down the page without reading a single word, because she trusted him, because in 9 years she had never thought of a single reason not to. He had understood her trust completely. He had spent years measuring it, testing its edges, learning exactly where its boundaries were, and then he had used it like a tool. That is the thing about people who are planning to betray you. They need your trust to do it. Your openness is the instrument of your own undoing. Which means there is a lesson for all of us in Yana's story that has nothing to do with drama or betrayal. Read what you sign. Every page. Always. Even when someone you love places it in front of you. Especially then. The following 2 days moved slowly. Victor's behavior at home was precise and uneventful. He came in, was civil, spent his evenings in his study, and wore the expression of a man playing chess against someone he was certain had never seen a chessboard. Patient, practiced, completely unaware that the other player had been studying the board for 4 days while he wasn't looking. Clayton, sensing the tension in the house the way children always do before the adults have even articulated it to themselves, was quieter than usual in the evenings. Yana read to him every night. They were in the middle of a long adventure novel they had started a month earlier. He listened with his full attention, and sometimes asked questions about the plot, and sometimes fell asleep mid-chapter with his breathing going slow and even before she'd reached the end of a paragraph. She would mark the page, cover him, and sit for a few more minutes in the dark of his room just listening to him breathe. There are moments in the middle of the hardest periods of a life when what carries you is not strategy or resolve. It's something much smaller and much more concrete. The sound of your child breathing. That's enough. That's all. Saturday morning, Kedrov called before 8. "Come in. There are results." She was at his office in 40 minutes. He met her at the front door, unusual. He normally waited in his office, and she read the outcome in his face before he spoke a word. They walked in, 2 folders on the desk. The first contained the handwriting expert's conclusion. Yana picked it up and found the key sentence, which had been marked. The signature on the power of attorney dated the 22nd of April was executed not by Yana Alexandrovna Merkuryeva, but by another individual, with a deliberate attempt to imitate her handwriting. The second contained the bank's response to the investigator's formal request. The electronic signature used to create the online account and authorize the loan had been generated from an Internet Protocol address registered to a legal entity called Mercury Trade, a limited liability company, one of Victor's companies, the office on Novokuznetskaya Street. The date and time of the transaction matched a working day on which Victor, according to his own business calendar, had been at that office. Yana put both documents down on the desk. Morning light came through the window and fell across the papers in a way that made them look almost ceremonial. "Is this sufficient?" she asked. "More than sufficient," Kedrov said. "The signature is not yours. The power of attorney is legally void. Every transaction built on it is challengeable and will collapse. The loan was opened from his work computer. That is fraud. Using stolen personal data, the statute is unambiguous. Add Vera's testimony. Add the message thread. Add your recording of his conversation with you in the kitchen. Add the Serbsky Center evaluation that directly contradicts his fabricated psychiatric document. Kuligin already has everything. I sent him the results 30 minutes ago. He's filing a motion to open a criminal case today." The criminal case was opened that same Saturday, by evening. Kedrov mentioned afterward that Kuligin had a professional intolerance for schemes that go unpunished. 20 years working economic crimes will do that to a person. It gives you a very particular kind of impatience for the moment the evidence is complete. Victor was formally charged on Sunday morning. Kedrov called at 9, brief and clear. Kuligin made the arrest. Victor is with the investigator now. 4 counts: fraud, document forgery, unlawful credit acquisition, attempted unlawful property transfer. Yana was standing at the kitchen window. The garden was full of morning light. The apple tree, the one they had planted together, the one Victor had cursed at and then laughed about, what felt now like a memory from someone else's life, stood full and green and completely indifferent to what was happening inside the house. "What comes next?" she asked. "Court. But you are in a strong position. The house is protected. The prohibition holds. The power of attorney is formally void. Every transaction under it is reversible. The bank will clear the loan from your name once the criminal verdict is issued. Victor's 3-count petition against you will be dismissed. It was built on a fabricated psychiatric evaluation that is now itself a piece of evidence in the criminal case against him. And Vera gave her statement on Friday," Kedrov said. "Complete. Detailed. Everything she told you in the kitchen. she confirmed in the formal record. He paused for a moment. She turned out to be a strong person, as it happens. Yes, Yana said. She did. They said goodbye. She put the phone in her pocket and stood at the window for a long time. 2 weeks later, Notary Sumarokov, in the presence of the investigator, formally annulled the power of attorney. The registry entry was marked void, executed in material violation of proper procedure. The investigation had, in the interim, traced how it had been done. Victor had found a woman with similar coloring and similar build to Yana. He had spent weeks coaching her to reproduce the signature. He had obtained a duplicate of Yana's identification documents through a network of people whose profession is exactly that, producing things that should not exist. Sumarokov had not suspected the substitution. He had seen a woman, seen identification, followed procedure. The procedure had been defeated from the outside. The bank issued a formal written notice that the credit account in Yana's name was suspended, that she bore no ongoing liability, and that all accrued interest would be annulled upon the issuance of the criminal verdict. In the course of the investigation, Lydia Savina was contacted as a witness. She came in, sat down, and told the investigator exactly what she had seen in that study: the documents, the dates, the conversations she had overheard through a closed door that had not been quite closed enough. She answered every question plainly and left without fanfare, which was entirely consistent with who she was. Yana called her afterward to say thank you. Lydia said, "I did what anyone should do," and hung up before Yana could say anything else. That was also entirely consistent. In the following weeks, the court dismissed all 3 counts of Victor's petition against Yana. The fabricated psychiatric evaluation was formally entered into evidence in the criminal case against him, not as a document, but as an exhibit of premeditation. The private clinic that had produced it was open to a separate investigation, and on the last day of that month, Yana called the builders. The hidden compartment in the study wall was dismantled in half a day. The metal box came out first. The cavity was plastered smooth, painted over in the same light gray as the rest of the wall, unbroken now, unremarkable, exactly what a wall is supposed to be. The painting Victor had hung to conceal it, the river, the field, the flat horizon, was carried up to the attic without ceremony and left there. In its place on the wall, Yana hung a frame. In the frame, the drawing Platon had brought home from school, the one he had handed her outside the school gates with the uncertainty of a child unsure whether their gift is wanted. A figure with wide-open arms like branches. A smaller figure with a backpack. That evening, Platon walked into the study and looked up at the wall for a long moment without speaking. "Why did you put it there?" he asked finally. "Because I like it," Yana said, "and because that's exactly where it belongs." Platon considered this with the gravity of a 7-year-old philosopher. Then he nodded, picked up a pencil from the desk, and went back to his room, where he had several unfinished drawings still waiting for him. Yana walked out of the study and closed the door. No more hidden compartments, no more schemes. What remained was the house, the sun, and a quiet that, for the first time in a very long time, had nothing hiding inside it. The following Monday, Yana called Gennady Fomich to say she was coming back. He said, "Good, Yana Alexandrovna," with the precise inflection of a man who had not noticed she was gone, and would not have mentioned it either way. The cactus on his desk had not been watered. Nothing had changed, which was, in its own small way, exactly what she needed. A man who builds a trap for another person rarely thinks about the possibility of ending up in it himself. Viktor Merkuriev was calculating and cold-blooded and genuinely intelligent about what he was doing. But he made one error that all of his intelligence could not correct. He looked at the woman beside him and saw someone who would not move. He saw silence and read it as surrender. He mistook her stillness for blindness. Yana Merkurieva had never raised her voice in her life. She hadn't needed to. The quieter she moved, the less warning she gave. And by the time Victor understood that she was already ahead of him, the prohibition was on the house. The expert had confirmed the forgery, the address traced back to his office, and the woman he had underestimated was sitting at an attorney's desk with a folder organized by date and sequence that told the whole story better than he ever expected anyone to be able to tell it. There is a lesson in this story that I want you to carry with you, and I'm going to say it plainly. Document your life, not obsessively, not anxiously, but carefully. Know what is signed in your name. Know what accounts exist in your name. Check your credit periodically. Read what you sign, all of it, even the pages that seem routine. Even when someone you trust puts the pen in your hand and tells you it's just a formality. Your name on a document means you are responsible for everything that document says. Make sure you know what it says. And here's the second thing, and this one matters just as much. Silence is not the same as stillness. A quiet person is not necessarily a passive one. The most dangerous move in any conflict is the one that looks, from the outside, like no move at all. Now, if this story reached you today, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, your city, your state, wherever home is for you. And tell me what you're taking from this story, what hit you, what you're thinking about, because this channel exists because of those conversations. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time. There are more stories coming, stories full of lessons, full of real people who faced real things and found a way through, and I promise it'll be worth every minute. I'll see you in the next one.